What's up, Internet? Wayne here, and welcome to Blank State of Mind. It's my opinion show. Plain and simple. This is where I give you my opinion on certain things going on in the world around me, things that I have opinions on, whether it be video games, movies, news, political things, whatever. This is going to be the opinion show. No back and forth, just what I think, and hopefully you'll find it entertaining, enlightening, who knows. First up this week on this inaugural episode of The Blank State of Mind, the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival, and everything that's wrong with New Orleans. That's right, I am from New Orleans. I have been in this city for almost 36 years. I drive through some of the worst neighborhoods that the city has to offer on a daily basis to go back and forth to work. One neighborhood in particular that everyone in the country seems to think is all New Orleans, the Lower Ninth Ward, I drive through twice a day. Here's a little factoid that you may not know about the Lower Ninth Ward. It looked like crap before Hurricane Katrina, and it looks like crap still, despite what Brad Pitt tried to do. But what I want to talk about this week is I went to Jazz Fest. Me and my wife went to Jazz Fest to see Pearl Jam, and it's just hilarious that we have something called the Jazz and Heritage Festival that is associated with New Orleans, and we as a city have no heritage and culture anymore. Jazz Fest is nothing more than a large commercial money grab holding on to what could be considered New Orleans aesthetics. New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival is held at the fairgrounds in New Orleans, and it is in the middle of an old neighborhood, the stereotypical New Orleans looking neighborhood that is not stereotypically New Orleans anymore. You see, New Orleans is a very old city inhabited by a lot of young, not native people. People come to this city and they buy shotgun houses from the 40s that look really bad, and they think, oh, it's the New Orleans charm of it. No. Fix your house. Paint your house. It looks like crap. The house was not designed to look like that. That is not what that house looked like when it was first built. But they sell this idea of this city that forgot. And Jazz Fest is not that. Jazz Fest is commercialized. It can all be summed up in the pictures from this concert. I didn't take pictures. When I got there, I was like, I just don't even want to be associated with this. We went to see Pearl Jam, who is not a jazz and heritage type band. There is local music at this festival, but it's relegated to small stages, small tents, right as you walk in. It's not given a spotlight, but yet all you'll see in advertisements for it and things anywhere is these New Orleans acts, these New Orleans centric themed things, and that is not what Jazz Fest is. Jazz Fest is full of self-important millennials who are there only to say that they were there. When my wife and I got there, it was, I'd say, about 1:30 in the afternoon. Pearl Jam didn't go on until 4:30, so we were there about 4 hours early, and we were nowhere near the stage. In this picture right here, you'll see that little arrow pointing off the picture. Yeah, that's where we were. We could not see the stage from where we were at. There was a VIP tent in the way of seeing a direct sight at the stage. We couldn't see any monitors showing what was going on the stage. We could barely hear Pearl Jam when they started to play because I don't know, they had issues with their sound system. I don't know, but just the crowd itself is full of these millennial hipster. They're there just so they can say they were at Jazz Fest. They're not there to listen to the music. Most of the people around me weren't even talking about, you know, when the bands were playing. We're like having conversations about other things. And I mean, literally, I had a guy sitting behind me talking about, I don't really like Pearl Jam. I like my bands with more of a jam feel. Like that, pulling some random shit out of his ass is the conversation he's like laying on this girl. And you would swear, like, all the pictures that you see of like the morons at Coachella, you would think that was where you were at, because there were morons dressed up like these, like, these females in this next to nothing like hippie wear and walking around, not listening to music, not doing anything, but walking around. You had dude bros with like cases of beer because, you know, I need beer and I need to drink all day, so I need to go to the beer tent and buy like 12 beers and I'm gonna stick ice in the box and drip water all over the place. Or like the potheads that come out in droves, who like, I'm going to the music fest and I'm getting high. Oh, and like, let's just ruin it for everybody who's actually there to see the band, which is quite hilarious. By the time that Pearl Jam actually came on, like, the crowd was dead up by the stage, and this is seen on many of videos. Like, there was actual Pearl Jam fan club members there who were like closest to the stage, periscoping the performance, and you could see that the crowd was dead. Now, I'm not the world's biggest Pearl Jam fan. My wife is a massive Pearl Jam fan, but even I can get into that music. I know their music, but it's like the crowd didn't. Until they started playing like the songs that everyone knows. We have no heritage to go along with Jazz Fest. We really don't. Fans of the music who go have to suffer for the morons that are there just to say they were there. And that is essentially the culture being sold for a profit. Jazz Fest should really be held at City Park. It's a bigger area. Things wouldn't be as crowded. Voodoo Fest is there every year. There's never any problems. There's never any overcrowding. People can see stages. They can see screens. But because Jazz Fest doesn't want to, the people behind the money that puts on Jazz Fest, they don't want to lose that ambiance of the old New Orleans neighborhood around it. It's not going to move. It's going to stay where it's at because they don't want to lose that. They think it's a selling point to them. It's just like any other product where you have your bullet points. This is one of the bullet point selling points. But it's just not like there is no New Orleans proper heritage. It is a byproduct of those who no longer live in New Orleans. It's a byproduct of people who want to hold on to that dream of that this really is New Orleans. This is what we live in, and it's not. We don't live in that. And what's sad is because I know people who had people playing at Jazz Fest, and they're musicians. And are they playing on these big stages? No, they're playing on the smaller stages. Because Jazz Fest has to book these big names in order to continue to be able to put itself on. Pearl Jam, Red Hot Chili Peppers, what do they have to do? What part of New Orleans' heritage and jazz do they have? Like, what? None. So it is a money thing now, and it's not what it was. It's not what it will be. Hell, everybody wants to sit there and say it was an important thing when Jazz Fest decided, that first Jazz Fest after Katrina, they weren't going to do Jazz Fest in New Orleans anymore. The people who owned the rights to put on Jazz Fest were going to move it. It was just how it was going to be. They gave in to the pressures of keeping it here because I think some artists, were like, well, no, if it's not in New Orleans, we're not going to play it. But they were going to move. They didn't want to have to deal with any of it here anymore. We have no identity of our own anymore. The identity that we have is this identity that we're clinging on from the past. Another news flash. All you see, like, you see the jazz funerals and things like that in New Orleans. That doesn't happen all the time. Only special people get that. That is not a natural, everyday occurrence. What the culture and the identity of New Orleans is now is crime and corruption. The politicians that run the city basically just come up with things to keep people distracted from the real problems the city has. Tourism is their only moneymaker, and it's horrible. It's horrible to be a tourist anymore, to come to the city, because all you come to the city for now is Bourbon Street and 24-hour drinking, and it's quite annoying to the actual locals who live here and try to do anything in the area. My wife has to work in the city, and it is a pain. And she's not even in the tourist industry or the guest industry or service industry, but she has to drive into that area, and it's ridiculous. Crime has gotten out of control, and the city would have you believe it's not. What you actually see when you come to New Orleans is a facade. If you go outside of just a small area, you see just how horrible the city is. And what's sad is what keeps the lie alive is the people who don't live in New Orleans, who don't live in the city. People who live on the North Shore, people who live in Baton Rouge, people who used to at one point in time live in New Orleans, who no longer live in New Orleans, that they still identify with those old ways. And they're the ones that keep it alive. But it doesn't help the city, it hinders it. When the city can finally get over itself and realize that it needs to rely on more than just the fake image of New Orleans to attract tourists, maybe the city will get its act together. But until then, it's not. News and mass media would have you believe that New Orleans is this big, huge area in southeastern Louisiana, and it's one big melting pot community, which is sad, because when I was younger and when I grew up, I saw New Orleans as a melting pot. My family was from New Orleans, and from an area that has now become run down and horrible. That is where we were from. You saw cultural differences, but it wasn't as bad as it is now. Will it ever be a nice, hospitable place to live? No. Not as long as politicians that are in charge, we keep getting more of those new politicians. It's no mystery as to why the city is the way it is when the last two mayors of New Orleans have been indicted on criminal charges. Ray Nagin, he's going to jail. I'm pretty sure it's done. He's done. Mark Morial, son of Dutch Morial, who was another mayor of New Orleans. People in his regime fell on a sword for him, so he had garnered a little bit more respect from the people that were in his administration, that he didn't actually face any of the indictments that were levied at him. The other people in his administration took the fall for him. But it's that kind of mentality, and it's that kind of atmosphere that has really just made New Orleans a horrible, horrible place. And it's perpetrated by this old image of New Orleans that most people here would love if it was that way, but it's not. This is not the big, happy jazz gumbo, kind of thing that you see. This city kind of sucks. And we are one horrible day from being Detroit. The neighborhoods and the cities outside of New Orleans are being affected by the crime that comes out of New Orleans. I know myself, I have to be vigilant, because just over the the parish line, people come in and, you know, they rob the neighborhoods right over here. Like, we used to never have to worry about crime around where I live now. But now you have to worry about it because they've essentially run out of places to rob in New Orleans, so they go into St. Bernard, they go into Jefferson, and rob those places. So it's... If I could say one thing to anyone watching this who may be considering coming here, come here, spend your money, that's great. But leave and let people know the truth that yes, the city is, it is worth being here, but it's not what it should be. There's so much potential in the world for this city, and it's squandered and it's thrown away. I went to Washington, D.C. for my honeymoon, and I saw a neighborhood that New Orleans would love to be. I stayed right inside New Orleans. It was like around the embassies, not that far away from the White House. It was an old neighborhood. It was a very classical-looking neighborhood. It is what the French Quarter wishes it could be because it is very old school architecture, but businesses and restaurants and all that inhabit these old buildings. People still live in these old buildings. It's clean, it's peaceful. Now, that may be because it's within walking distance of the White House, it's within walking distance of all these embassies, all these other things that are central to the federal government, and that's probably why this neighborhood is, you know, as nice as it is. But that is what New Orleans wants to be. That is what New Orleans wants to sell their image as to the rest of the world, and that is not what New Orleans is. So, in conclusion, do not believe the lie that is New Orleans. It is a fantasy image made up for those who don't know any better. As the city is starting to consume itself. And that is a terrible thing. Without the city, the surrounding areas would kind of fall apart. And it's sad because this area, like the city used to be something great at one point in time, and it's really not anymore. And that's just my opinion. I know other people feel the same way, and I know some people who would sit there and argue with me every counterpoint to what I just said. So if you have any comments, issues, or whatever, leave them in the comments below. I will see all of them. And until next time, this has been Blank State of Mind. Out.